Very grateful to be sober. Hi, Zoom. And it's like a lot going on up here. You know what I mean? It's cool though, you know. The concept thing was pretty cool. I never saw that. And I hear Drew over there. Yeah. Yeah. I was like, that's pretty impressive, you know. And I thought we were gonna read the whole thing, you know, but that's cool. And I have some friends here. Thank you for coming. My son's out there sleeping probably. And I'm just like, I'm always awkward and weird. I just have to get that out right out the rip. Like I'm weird. I'm like the little kid in elementary school that smells like poopy pants and syrup. You know what I mean? I just am like that. Been that way my whole life. You know what I mean? I'm a nail biter. I don't have any left. So I'm sitting up there like this. So you guys don't know I'm a nail biter, you know, and so I'm just like, my sponsor says that self-centeredness, you know, I realized that when I went to the bathroom right before the meeting, my zipper was down the whole time in the greeting line, you know, and so there you go. Got that out of the way, you know, and so I'm just awkward. I have some new friends that were like, oh, I saw you last night. And I'm thinking, I better change my whole talk tonight, you know, and so I say a prayer and I ask God to use me, you know, to open my heart and use me in a way to touch the newcomer, you know, and those that are new, I want to welcome you to Alcoholics Anonymous. Those that have the courage to stand up and let us know you were new. Thank you. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, I'd come here and they would ask for, you know, newcomers and I'd be like, yeah, raise my hand. And I'm like, I'm Pat and I'm an addict and not an AA. I mean, everyone's like, oh, there's an addict in our room. Let's get him out of here, you know. And I felt like it's my perception. It's probably not the facts, but I felt like I was run out of AA. You know what I mean? And I'd flip off the old guy. I wanted to piss him off. And no one ever followed me out and said, hey, kid, here's a big book. Take this home or to your bush or wherever you're living. Maybe you might have alcoholism. You know, I didn't know that I had alcoholism. I'll tell you my story, but I didn't know I had alcoholism. I didn't even know what alcoholism was, you know, when I came here. And so then I would come to Alcoholics Anonymous and I wouldn't identify because I didn't want the judgment that I felt in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I always, you know, want to thank you for your courage for standing up and saying you're new, you know, and then I would hear some things, you know, coming back in and out and hear some things. And, you know, I'd hear you talk about your drinking and I would say, that happens to me too. You know, and now hear someone talk about like their crazy, insane thoughts that led them to the first drink. And I was like, maybe. But then I would justify, rationalize, and minimize why my story is not like yours. And then I would go, maybe I'm alcoholic. And so then there are newcomers. I raise my hand and I'm Pat, I'm an alcoholic and an addict. You know, the whole room, you know, look at you, they all zone in on you, you know. Here, meet Bob. He's from another fellowship. He'll send you off to La La Land to meet, who knows, some other guy. Like I had the courage to come into AA, you know. And so I go out there and I die. And I'm grateful today that I know that I'm an alcoholic. You know, I mean, my sobriety date's the 23rd of October of 2002. And I have a sponsor yeah, God gets all the credit and a strong home group. You know what I mean? A home group that just looked at me and said, keep coming back, kid, you know. 8 years, 8, 9, and 10, you know, suicidal, horrible behavior up until then, you know, they had the patience and the kindness, you know, and I have a sponsor. His name's Mike S. He lives in Riverside. I love that man. I called him this morning, you know what I mean, just to thank him for sponsorship and his guidance and his love. And my home group's the South Coast Speakers Meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We meet on a Wednesday night in Laguna. 7:30 Wednesday. I love the history of my home group. Our first meeting was in February 1946, you know, and there's a lot of history. You know, they were all wearing suits back then, you know, everyone, you know. And so when I showed up, they're like, you need to wear a collared shirt to be behind the podium and all those weird things. And what it taught me was like how to show up for an interview, you know, and how to show up like to a, you know, funeral and how to dress up to go to my family's house when I got invited for, you know, Christmas or whatever that was. And I'm grateful for my home group. You know, I love Alcoholics Anonymous. It's really an honor and a privilege to be asked. So thank you for asking me to participate in my recovery. Here I am. present in the moment, not yet. I don't feel like I'm there yet. Feel like I want to chew my fingers off, and but I have alcoholism, not alcoholism. You know what I mean? I have a mind that's like, I'm not like you. I'm different from you. I don't look like you. All these kind of things. I'm sitting with my dear friend and we're on our way here and I'm like connected and I get out of the car and I'm like, yeah, don't go. You got to turn around and go home, but I'm in his car, so I really can't go anywhere, and I'm like, I'm forced to go in, and I have the separator, I have that thing inside that's telling me, dude, it's trying to get me to get going, I'm not even alcoholic getting out of his car. I think they got the wrong guy, they got the wrong guy. And thank God for the design for living that I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous is that when I walked in the front door, I put my hand out and I said, hi, I'm Pat, And then all of a sudden I felt like I was a little bit in. And then so great that you put the speaker at the greeting line because then I was stuck. I'm like, oh God, I have to do this, but I'll tell you what, by the time I walked in, other than a self-obsession that I'm going to talk, and I feel like I'm all the way in. You know what I mean? And if you're new, like, come all the way in and sit all the way down. I sit all the way down in my home group. I have a commitment in that home group. I've had it for 21 years. I'm not giving it up, and I earned my seat in Alcoholics Anonymous. I did. I can tell you that I had alcoholism at 17, though I didn't know it. At 17 years old, I suffered from alcohol delusion of the mind. I'm awkward, poopy pants kid. I drink St. Ides out of a brown paper bag because that's what gangsters did. I want to be a gangster, and I had size 50 Dickies pulled all the way up, and I had a 5XL sweatshirt on. I even poured beer in the curb for the dead homies. Now I never been in a fight. I have big friends like the security guy over here, I mean, they stand up as security. I was like, that dude's big, I have him, and I would talk a lot of, and then you'd want to fight me and my friends would beat you up. I'd even get a little kick in there, sucker, But I drink alcohol, like terrified alcohol, right? And it gives me some sort of what I believe to be power, right? What I believe to be like this determination that I can go out and live this thing called life. It took away all that fear and all that insecurity. It took away that mind that said, I'm not like you. It made me just like you. You know what I mean? And they talk about a chameleon, one day I'm a gangster. The other day I'm a surfer. Never even rode a wave on a surfboard, but I got the board. I got everything, And next day I'm a skateboarder. So I get the skateboard, but I can't like ride standing up. I got to sit down going down a hill, hope no one sees me, and they used to call that a poser. That was me, but I would drink alcohol and it wouldn't matter to me that I didn't have a dad. You know what I mean? I drink alcohol and it wouldn't matter that my mom wasn't there. My mom was a single parent. She was an Alcoholics Anonymous member. She was sitting in a meeting every night of the week. It's my perception. She was always gone, and I was I was a mat key kid because the mat was under the key was under the doormat, and I would go home after school and I'd, pour a bowl of tricks or something. And that was dinner, and I had free range to do what I wanted. So by the time I'm 17, I'm listening to the homies in the neighborhood and we're listening to gangster rap and, where we want lower cars, and I'm like, orale, homie, and I never been in a fight, but I gave myself 3 dots on my ankle for mi vida loca in Mission Viejo. And, and I'm blacking out at 17. My mom found like a bottle of tequila and a bag of weed in her house. And she's like, you can't drink in my house, and like she's an AA, 16 years sober, telling me this is a house of recovery, and she had the big book on the kitchen table or the whatever, the dining room table. And I grew up at a meeting every night of the week. Like I knew what recovery was. But she's like, you can't drink in my house. And I heard, you need to hide it better, Pat. You know what I mean? That's what I heard her tell me. She's like, you can't drink in this house. I hear you need to hide it better. And so I do. I hide it better for a month or whatever it is, 2 months, or until I got caught again. And I was at a party, and it was a Friday night, and I thought it'd be a good idea to drop LSD. And I come home, and my mom's door's locked, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know what to do. Should I sneak in? It's like everything's melting, and I'm ringing the doorbell, and it's like boom, whoa, ding, dong. You know what I mean? And I'm like, and my mom comes, and she's like melting. You know what I mean? I'm like, dude, this is rad. And she has some things in her hand, and what they are is another bottle of tequila and another bag of weed. And I'm like, oh no, like I know it's all bad, but it's just wah. And what I heard her say to me is, you're kicked out of the house, right? You're kicked out. And so I went into my bedroom, and I packed my backpack, and I walked by my mom, and I remember looking at her right in the eyes and telling her, I'm going to do everything I can to ruin your life. And I literally watched my mom's heart break. And I went into my bedroom, I packed my backpack, and I walked by her, and no care for her sobriety, no care for her life. Like the book talks about selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my problem. I didn't need care to nothings. And what my mom said to me that night, she said, you can stay here and be sober, or you can go out on the streets and get loaded, but you need to make a choice. That night I grabbed my mom by the collar, and I slammed her against the wall. I F-bombed her, told her everything she can do. And alcohol was making decisions for me at 17 years old. My mom was my hero, man. My mom was my best friend. My mom was everything to me. And alcohol told me to put my hands on my mom. And I didn't call my mom for a year and a half because I was going to make her pay for that decision. You know what I mean? I was going to make her pay for that decision. And I ended up in on the tenderloin. I'm a tenderloin kind. There's like the progression of my disease is that fast. You know what I mean? It's like there's no nothing in the middle. Full blown alcoholism at 17, though I don't know, and I don't get sober till I'm 27 years old. And the progression is that fast. And I'm in the tenderloin, and I'm running, and I'm doing what I need to do. And I had this bright idea that mom has money. Now she hadn't heard from me in a year and a half, and I call her collect to get money from my mom. And my story and my lie is that I got in an accident, you know what I mean? And I got hit by a truck, and I need to go to the hospital, and I broke a leg, and I broke an arm, and I probably need a back brace, and she's like, well, how am I going to help you? And I said, I don't know how I'm going to pay for the hospital. And she's like, well, just give me the address and I'll send him a check. And I'm like, oh, no, mom, they need cash, And she's like, well, how am I going to give you cash? And I taught my mom how to go to Western Union, right down the street from her work. My mom was so terrified, so terrified, heartbroken, terrified. And she runs down there to wire me $150. And the next week, Clumsy got in another accident, you know what I mean? And then a week later, Clumsy, I don't know, got another accident. Maybe I was getting a job or something, And so for the next 8 years, this would go on. The next 8 years of my drinking, this was going on. Oh, my sponsor's calling me. Can't answer right now. And just kidding, I didn't answer it. And for the next 8 years, like I would die of a slow death called alcoholism, And I'm a panhandling kind of alcoholic. I don't know any other panhandlers here. No one in Martinez or wherever we're at, And where are we? And but I would panhandle, you know what I mean? I remember this guy he had a bone in his dreadlock, and he had a sign that said sparechange.com, and I was like, dude, killing it, And so I just make friends with him, you know what I mean? And I'm not an alcoholic. Like if I get as bad as Bonehead, whatever his name was, then I'm alcoholic, And it got to the point where I was like, if I have to push a shopping cart around, then I'll get sober. And so I had a friend who had a shopping cart. I just put my things in his cart, And I'm like, bro, you need to go to AA, bro. You're bad, And and that's just like the delusion, it's like I was just so like twisted up, like everybody else had a problem, I didn't. I would, they talk about lowering the bar, I mean, I crossed the invisible line long before I even was 17 years old, not even knowing it. I am the lower companion. I'm just meant like rationalizing and justifying everything, and because I get a group of friends and I'm like down here and all of them are like, when I get as bad as him, I'll get sober, and then I just like, I'm out, and I go find another group. And, so basically what happened to me was I was 20, I don't know, 5 years old. And, I had gotten a job at the YMCA in the Presidio. I had met this girl who detoxed me. She had untreated Al-Anon. She brought a totally alcoholic into her house in the Mission District. You know what I mean? It was like detoxed me, fed me. 45 days later, I don't know about you, but I was like full on love affair with this girl. And I think she loved me. I don't know. But she started nagging. She was like, "You need to get a job," which I thought was a little excessive. And so I did, I'm a rule follower. I'm not dumb, you know what I mean? And so I got a job at the YMCA in an after school program for an elementary school, 45 days sober, off of the Tenderloin. And I did. I got the job and I showed up and all is good, day one, day two, day three. I even got a best friend. He was a second grader. He introduced me to his mom as his best friend. You know what I mean? That's what I mean. And I was like, I got a best friend. I got a girlfriend. I got a place to live. I don't pay rent. I got a place to, I got a house, man. I'm coming up. And I think that normal living is the solution for alcoholism, right? Normal living. Like I got the house, I got the girl, I got the best job I've ever had. Like, dude, I'm in the game. Like I'm never gonna drink or do drugs ever again. Like I made it. I arrived. And I didn't know about alcoholism, and I didn't know about the insanity of the first drink. I didn't know of anything. And I remember pushing my best friend on a swing. I was like, it was so beautiful. I mean, I was like, there wasn't even a San Francisco wind. Nothing. It was like a crisp, perfect day. I'm pushing my best friend. I'm like, my life is I was grateful, Pat, I was counting my blessings. How beautiful. And the thought crossed my mind that a bag of heroin would be a good idea. Straight, it just was like that. Bam. No defense, no God, no steps, no sponsor, no design for living. I called my homeboy and he brought it to that elementary school. And I said, hey, I need a pint of tequila too. So he hooked it up. I got a twofer. And I went into that elementary school bathroom and I did what I had to do. And I came to however long later with my best friend, and the director of that job found me on that toilet. And like for the first time in my life, like I could see how my behavior affected another human being. I watched that second grader crying. I couldn't even turn and look at him. I was walking out and he said, Pat, when are you coming back? And I knew in my heart of hearts I wasn't coming back. And I thought this was about consequences. Come day A, lost your wife. I didn't want a wife, so I'm not alcoholic. You lost your kids. I didn't have any kids. I wasn't alcoholic. You lost your job. I wasn't alcoholic. I thought this was about consequences, right? And my consequences are a direct result of my heroin use, which makes me not an alcoholic. And so I called my mom and I went to treatment and she sent me to Betty Ford, and I love Betty Ford. I found a girlfriend there. And because I don't know if you've realized the pattern, sober attachment, and like we fell in love, like it was true love, I mean, same sobriety date deal. She gave me a little purple crystal. I would rub it and just be like, oh my God, we're in love, And we didn't even have a conversation. I wrote her a note, pure romance, And And I'm like super sober guy when I'm in love. You know what I mean? Super sober guy. I got the pom poms out for recovery. I'm like, recovery's the best thing ever. I'm doing book studies. I'm like most likely to succeed rehab guy. Remember when everyone coined you out at the end? We're all going to drink and you're going to stay sober, you know? And I got a treatment. I got on the plane to go to sober living in Hawaii because that's where God wanted to go. I mean, my girlfriend wanted to go, you know, and I wrote her a note. I was like, where should we go to sober living together? You know, and she's like, let's go to Hawaii. And so I was like, this is romantic, you know, and I got on the plane and the flight attendant's like, what do you want to drink? Well, consequences, not alcoholic. I ordered a Heineken to go to sober living to be with my sober girlfriend. If you're new, this is insanity. Knowing that when I drink, I go to the tenderloin. You know what I mean? There's no stop button for me. There's no in between. There's no social. I'll try to control it. Like it's on and I'm downtown. I know that already. I brag about myself being alcoholic. I know that I could outdrink. Well, not you guys. We probably all drinking together. You know what I mean? But you know the deal. Like when I'm drinking, it's all till we're done. And I know that about me, but I don't understand that the main problem of the alcoholic center is in the mind. I don't get that part. I didn't hear that in the rooms of AA. And so I drank one, I drank two, I got off the plane. Ended up drinking like 12 or 13 Heinekens. And I'm standing there and I'm thinking about it. Sober living or bar. Sober living or bar. Thinking that I had some sort of control. If you're new, it's the first drink that gets you drunk. Like when I put the first one in, I lost the power of choice. But I didn't know that. And I stood there and I thought about it, sober living or bar. And I went into the bar and I ordered another drink. And that girl ended up overdosing and dying and never making it to Hawaii. But mom found Al-Anon, or she didn't find it. She started to go. And the language changed. I'd call and ask for money and she would say no, you know, and I'm like, what do you mean no? She's like, no's a full sentence, you know, and I would be like, well, mom, if I only had a dad, I wouldn't be in this situation. That's all your fault. And I hit that guilt button and my mom would wire me the money just like that. Then I would call her and tell her how much I loved her and how great of an AA member she was. And she'd wire me the money just like that. And then I would call and she would tell me, I'm going to set a boundary. Oh my God, a boundary. I'd bulldoze that thing. You know what I mean? I'm like, it's all your fault. You kicked me out of the house. Like, duh, like you owe me. And she'd wire me the money. And she ended up getting me a plane ticket back to Los Angeles. And I went straight downtown to Skid Row. And I survived Skid Row for a year and a half before I got sober. Things that I was doing on Skid Row, I don't hope anyone would ever have to do. And I blacked out for 3 days. I came to on the 23rd of October of 2002 as a straight man prostituting myself for one more. And that morning, man, I came to and something inside of me said, call your mom and ask for help. Like not call your mom and ask for money. Not call your mom and say, I need this plan. I need you to do this. Just call and ask for help. I just said, call and ask for help. And I called my mom and I said, Mom, I need help. I didn't have anything else to say after that. I just was defeated, man. And she said, just stay wherever you are and someone from Alcoholics Anonymous will come and get you. If I come and get you, I'm going to end up killing you. And she hung up. And my mom called the biggest goof in AA. He was loud. He was annoying. He was on fire for AA. That's all I can say. He had the leather thing with the big book in there. He understood a true 12-step. He went and grabbed a guy with 90 days. And they drove down to that motel. And the 90-day guy was on a walker, dude. He was like older than dirt, bro. You know, he was like, I'm Jack, I'm an alcoholic. I was like 98 pounds, just like vibrating, you know what I mean? I was like noodling around, you know, and The other guy was on a walker. He's like, I'm John. I got 90 days sober, and I was like, losers. These guys are idiots. Same mind that I had when I talked about getting out of the car and walking in here. Trying to separate me from you that fast, man, because if I let you in, you're going to hurt me like everyone's hurt me my whole entire life. And I know that when I called and asked for help, God heard that prayer. I didn't believe in God until I was 10 years sober. But God heard that prayer. That guy Jack said, come with me, kid. And I got off the bed and I followed that guy to the motel. He said, get in the van, kid. I got in the van. And they started telling me their stories, good old 12-step. No therapist, no meds, good old AA. Big book, 2 members, me. And they told their stories about their drinking. And they were laughing and they were excited about recovery. Kind of like Drew was about the concept, Yeah, they were happy, joyous, and free. And I'm judging them, thinking these guys are losers. And before he knew it, I ended up at Charlie Street, low bottom indigent detox, man, no meds, nothing. 10 days, there's a cot. Good luck. And members of AA that sat down with that book and they read word for word and line for line. And I looked at the guy and I said, holy cow, Jack. He's like, what, kid? I go, I'm an alcoholic. From reading that book, I learned what alcoholism was, that when I put one drink in me, I can't stop until I end up in jail. And more importantly, with a sober mind, I have a mind that's driving me back to alcohol, which is going to kill me. He said, you might be alcoholic. And I looked at him, I said, I'm alcoholic. That was it. Boom. He talked about God. There was no way I was believing in God. I came to believe that he had joy for his daughter when he walked her down the aisle when she got married. He talked about being happy for his grandkids every day, every Saturday when he watched them play baseball. I felt that maybe one day I could have joy and happiness for others. I made a decision to do what he told me to do. It doesn't matter if I believed in God or not. God heard that silly prayer. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me, to do with me, right? I didn't even have any heart to it. I didn't even know what I was reading off the page. I read it. I did an inventory. 4 days sober, I was making an amends. 4 days sober, I was making an amends. 90 days sober, I made amends to my mom. I sat down with her and she's like, it's about time. She looked at me and she said, I know that every time you asked for money, it was a lie. And I was like, then why did you give me the money? And she said, because when you left my house at 17, you broke my heart. And I stayed up every day for 10 years, terrified I was going to get the call that you died and bled out. The real harm wasn't that I lied to her. The real harm was that I robbed her of her security day in and day out for one more. And I asked her what I could do to make it right. She's like, just get in the middle of AA and help people. And I ran back to the sponsor. I was like, dude, this healing magic of Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, yeah, you're paying the money back. I said, she didn't want the money. He said, I don't care, and I had to write her a note that said, I love you and I appreciate you today. And I wrote this note and I left the money once a week. And I don't know how long it went by, but I had to write the note every day. And I wrote the note every day and I cried and I circled the teardrops and I talked about the love that I had for her and the heat, and when I was 10, all these memories, I was falling in love with my mom. And this is weird. It's weird falling in love with my mom. You guys are having relationships in AA and I'm falling in love with my mom. Like, weird. And I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. And he said, you don't have to do it anymore if you don't want. He said, but how free do you want to be, kid? And I wrote the note. And I gave her the money. 5 years into it, she's like, I no longer want the money anymore, but I still want the notes. You know what I mean? And eventually, I stopped falling in love with my mom and I met this girl in AA, YPAW. And there's so many YPAW things have come up on it. So here we go. You know what I mean? And she was like the treasurer of the committee. I was events, real deal. And so I broke up with her. And because I'm terrified of commitment and relationships. And then you know how these relationships go in early recovery. We wanted to go to Vegas for the weekend, even though we weren't together. And she got pregnant. True story. We didn't even like each other. Really. And she decided to keep it, and I tried every manipulation tactic to get rid of that kid. I did. I'm being honest here. I did. I tried because I'm terrified, I'm like a little side DJ. I'm like crackhead job washing windows. You know what I mean? I'm a student. How am I going to be a dad? And my sponsor told me where to stand in the labor room, and my mom's taking pictures, and that's weird, and then my son came out and I looked right into the eyes of God. I was 5 years sober. I don't know, 4 years sober, whatever it was. And it was like a chisel that knocked the ice off my heart. I didn't know that I could love another human being or be loved by another human being on the relationship that I have with my son. And thank God for the women in Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you for sharing your stories. Because I would hear you talk about the father of your child not showing up for child support. And through your pain, I learned how to be financially responsible for my son. You would share about the pain that you felt when the father of your child didn't show up for visitation. And through your pain, I learned how to show up for my kid. And he cried, which I don't deal with crying anything. You know what I mean? About that time, I didn't know how to deal with it. So I put him on my head and he didn't cry up there. And I'd walk around all the time with him on my head, and I took care of him for the first, year and a half. His mom worked. I went to school. I took care of my kid. And I didn't know how to be a father. And one day I was at my house in my apartment and my sponsee was there and I stood up and I put him on my head and I put his head right into a ceiling fan. I was like, wow. I turned green and I handed my sponsee my kid and I went to the back room and I'm like, God, I don't believe that you exist, but old man John told me to pray. What the heck do I do? I just put my head in a ceiling fan. And I heard a voice in the closet. It's like, you need to call the doctor, dude. I was like, whoa, profound. And I called the doctor and he told me what to do. And I looked at my kid and there wasn't anything wrong with him. There's a little bump on his head. But what happened for me in that moment was that I cared more about another human being than I cared about myself. Selfishness and self-centeredness walked through that door on the 23rd of October, And I don't know how 6 years, 7 years, a little bit less selfish, man, than it was when I walked in, And, because of my behavior, that relationship ended. And for the last 16 years, we've co-parented because of the 9 Step Amends and brighted that relationship. We went to New York last month. I get there, but and I didn't. I talked about not believing in God, and 8 years sober because of my behavior and one more broken relationship. I was going to commit suicide, and I don't mean just like I think I'm going to do. I was driving my car 100 miles an hour down the road, going to barrel my car in oncoming traffic, and right as I'm about to turn, I heard a voice in the back seat that said, call that guy Jonathan from your Tuesday night meeting before you kill yourself. And I called him and he answered in one ring. He said, I've been waiting for this call for a year. He sat down with me and he read the page 52 of the big book. We're having trouble with personal relationships, can't control my emotional nature, prey to misery and depression. He looked at me and he said, what you think is a broken relationship? He said, what you're suffering from is untreated alcoholism. And he asked me if I'd go back through the steps with that man. And I did. And I was suicidal from 8.5 to 10 years sober. And I don't mean just like I'd be on the cliff going to kill myself. And he said, well, how's it? I'd call him, I'm going to jump. And he'd say, how's that amends to your dad coming along? I said, I'm not making it. He said, well, can you meet me at the meeting tomorrow? Because I'd like to say goodbye before you kill yourself. And I got off the cliff and I show up at the meeting and I go see my sponsor and he would hug me and he would love on me. And he'd say, I'll see you at the meeting tomorrow. Right. And I go, okay, I'll see you at the meeting tomorrow. And then I would call him 2 hours later on the cliff and you know the deal. We did this dance for a while. And finally, I was like, I'm not making this. I'm not doing this. I'm not calling him. I pulled my car over on the 57 freeway bridge over the 5. And I got out of the car and I said, God, you have 10 seconds because I'm jumping off this bridge. For the first time in my life, I went from human dependence to a God dependency. And I got to the headlight of my car and my phone rang and I answered. And this kid on the other end, he said, hey, Pat, is this you? And I said, yeah. He goes, this is Chris. I go, what's up, Chris? Now I'm on the bridge about to jump off. And I said, what's up, Chris? He goes, hey, when I came to AA, he said, you saved my life. And I was like, okay, Chris, that's great. He said, but just wanted to call and tell you that I'm leaving AA because I'm going to go get loaded. And I'm like, oh, no, Chris, we don't drink one day at a time here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I started to talk about my thinking that preceded the first drink. And I told him story after story after story. And Chris has said, oh, yeah, oh, yeah, oh, yeah. And I said, hey, Chris, there's a meeting starting in 30 minutes at the Laguna Beach Canyon Club. You want to meet me there? He said, yeah, I'll meet you there. I said, all right, Chris, I'll see you there. And I got in my car and drove 30 miles south to the Canyon Club. And there's Chris. And then Chris is like, gives me a big hug. He's like, will you be my sponsor? And I'm like, oh my God. I'm thinking, hell no, I don't want to be. But the words came out of my mouth that said, yes, I'll be your sponsor, Chris. No, I didn't tell him I was about to kill myself. I just said, yes, I'll be your sponsor. And I went home that night and I'm angry and I'm mad at God and I don't understand. Like, I just want out. I can't feel this anymore. I just want out. Like, why, God, are you putting another alcoholic in my life to be a service to? And it was like a hand on my shoulder and pushed me off of my couch. And I was in the fetal position on the floor. And I was just screaming in the most physical, emotional, mental torture I'd ever felt. And the words came out of my mouth. And I started to make amends to a man I never met. My mom got pregnant in a blackout. I don't have a part in that relationship. But where had I been selfish, self-centered, and self-seeking in every area of my life? If I only had a dad, I'd know how to be a friend to you. If I only had a dad, know how to be a boyfriend to you. If I only had a dad, know how to show up for work. And it was like the victim was pulled out and the power of God, which is love, went deep down within. And I got off the floor that night and I went to my bed and I passed out just like that. And my relationships with you got deeper. My relationships with my son got deeper. When he was in second grade, he got scared. He didn't want to eat dinner anymore. He didn't want to eat food. For 3 days, he went without food. And I was angry and I was mad. I'm like, you got to eat. You got to eat. And 3 days in, he looked at me and he said, he's like, Dad. And I had an intuitive thought that said, feed him softer food. And I fed him softer food. And he got through his fear. We started to pray before dinner and eat softer food. He walked through his fear. And then he was afraid to go to sleep at night. And I get mad at him because you have to sleep, because if you're tired, you're not going to do as good at school. And he doesn't sleep for 3 days. And I have intuitive thought that said, read a book with him and say a prayer with him. And we started to pray and we started to read books. And then he got to school and didn't want to go to school because he was afraid he was going to die at school. And I said, when your dad's afraid, what does your dad do? And he said, when you're afraid, he said, you pray and you be of service. I said, how can you be of service at school? He said, I don't know. I'll go find out. And I went and picked him up and he was so excited to tell me he met this kid on the playground who had just found out that his parents were getting a divorce and he was going to have to stay at his parents' halftime and his house halftime. And he had been living that way for, 6, 7, 8 years. And he was able to share with him how he got through it. And overpaid. He came back from Portland and speaking in Portland on a Sunday, and I come pick him up and I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. And I pick him up and I'm rah, 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 and he goes, Dad, did you forget to pray? So we say a prayer. We get to my apartment and we went and got some food, and we get to my apartment and we get out of the car and this girl's punching windows in my apartment complex. She's screaming, F her boyfriend, F this. And I look at my son and I go, just go inside and separate the food. I'll be there in a minute. And I said, God, please direct my next action. And the girl walked right up to me and she said, my boyfriend took my phone. Can I borrow your phone? God answered my prayer. I gave her the phone and I said, God, please direct my next action. And she said, my dad wants to talk to you. He talked to my dad. God answered my prayer. I said, yeah. I said, I got on the phone. I said, hi, my name's Pat. He said, I don't know you. It's going to take me an hour to get to your house. He said, can you take my daughter inside and take care of her and clean her up? God answered my prayer. And I took her inside and I took her into my bathroom and I cleaned off her arms. She had cut herself up with a knife all up and down her arms. And I cleaned off her arms and I bandaged her up and I said, I'll be right back. And I walked into the kitchen where my son had separated the food and he had separated into 3 plates. He said, Dad, you think she wants to eat? I said, I don't know, go ask her. And he walked around the corner and she was crying. He said, every time I'm sad, I pray. Will you pray with me? And she's holding her hands. And I looked around the corner and I just started to cry. My heart was filled with so much gratitude for my home group and for what you guys taught me, because I took that and I applied it in my home. And then he said, amen. And he goes, every time I'm done praying, I meditate. We meditate with me. She was stuck. You know what I mean? And he's breathing God in, and he's breathing fear out. And he's breathing God in, he's breathing fear out. And he comes back down, and we sit down, and he prays, and he thanks God for allowing us to be a service to this girl. And her dad called, and me and him went outside, and her dad pulled in this 64 Impala. Dude, like 6 gangsters got out of there, and he walked right up to him and goes, hi, I'm Eden. And he said, we want to thank you for allowing us to be of service to your daughter. And he turned around, he walked off. Dude, I'm looking at this kid. I'm like, dude, will you be my sponsor? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, yeah, what he said, you know, I took off, you know. And we got inside and we prayed again. He prayed one more time. And he thanked God, you know. And my son, he graduated with a 4.5 grade point average the end of this year. He had all AP and honor classes. And I tried to help him get into college. He goes, Dad, what are you doing? You didn't even go to college, you know? You know? He got a 4 on his honor test in calculus. You know what I mean? I'm like, what the heck, you know? And he wanted to I wanted him to go to Parsons, which is in LA. He wanted to go to FIT, which is in New York. I'm manipulating the situation, you know. He gets into FIT, you know, and we go to New York, me and his mom and him last month, you know. We're going to drop him off on the 15th of August to Manhattan to go to college. Not because of anything that I did, because of what you guys have done. I asked my son straight up to him. I said, what would you equate your success to, Eden? This fast, he said, because of Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, all of the men that you brought into my life, Brad, you're one of them. TJ Bryant overdosed and died. They were close, him and TJ. Johnny, in and out of AA, 8 years sober. He said, all of those guys have taught me something. And he said, it's the stories that you guys share in Alcoholics Anonymous that given me my success. If you're new here tonight, Alcoholics Anonymous is a lot more than just not drinking. This is about growing up. And it's my prayer that if you're new, you find someone in this home group that will help you stay sober one day at a time. My name is Pat. I'm an alcoholic, and I love you all.